About 2 years after the Lahore edition of Broken Column, I was able to plan a trip to Dhaka in Bangladesh. I had identified one monument in Dhaka to make casts of, which is the Martyred Intellectuals Monument in Dhaka. I was nervous because I did not have any permissions to work on site on the monument when I left. I had managed to secure an artist residency at the Brit of Arts organization. Taiba Lipi and Mehbubur Rahman, the founders of Brit of Arts, generously offered me a live work studio for about 3 weeks, and they put me in touch with the local sculptor, Pramutesh Pilak, to help me with the process. Pramutesh was very resourceful and tracked down the local municipal and district authorities. It took us almost 2 weeks to get permission to work on the Martyred Intellectuals Monument. But in the meanwhile, Pramutesh introduced me to the wonderful curators of the Liberation War Museum and the Killing Fields Museum. Both of these museums are also located in Dhaka, and the curators of both museums were very forthcoming in allowing me access to their artifacts, memorials, and archives. I started with making casts of some of the artifacts of the Liberation War Museum. The museum has all kinds of very interesting artifacts from the War of 1971. Bombs, rifles, pistols that were actually used by the Bangladeshi soldiers in the 1971 war. I was pleasantly surprised to see photos of women soldiers in the Bangladesh army that had participated in the war. They fought shoulder to shoulder with their male counterparts. The Liberation War Museum also has skulls and bones from various mass graves that were found in the aftermath of the war. It was a pretty intense and visceral experience to just be in the presence of these artifacts. The curator, Amina Tapsam, and her wonderful museum staff went above and beyond to help me access all kinds of artifacts from their collections to make casts from. They even gave me a big outdoor space on the terrace of the museum to make the casts. I did a few tests with the latex we had on some of the artifacts. When the latex cured overnight and detached easily, then we proceeded with applying latex to all the artifacts. From there on, we just worked in layers of applying gauze and then latex to make the casts of the artifacts. While I was working at the Liberation Museum, I got permission from the Killing Fields Museum to make casts there. This museum was built to memorialize a mass grave that was found in an underground water tank. They discovered human remains of about 1,500 people in the tank. The museum is built on top of that water tank, but the water tank has now been sealed. They have built a memorial wall in the back of the memorial garden. I decided to make casts of a big section of the memorial wall, the seal of the water tank, and one of the plaques displayed in the memorial garden that says "Stop Genocide." It took us several days of working steadily to make these 3 casts. We would apply a layer of latex to the 3 casts, then go to the Liberation Museum and apply another layer on the artifacts there. By the end of my second week in Dhaka, we finally got permission to make casts of the Martyred Intellectuals Monument. At this point, the casts at the Liberation Museum were drying and curing. We were finishing up the casts at the Killing Fields Museum, so the timing worked out perfectly. I was able to devote the last week to working intensively on the Martyred Intellectuals Monument. I decided to make 3 casts, one inside the water reservoir in the front, one of a big section of the back wall, and one of a big section of the top of the front wall. Since this memorial is very popular with hundreds of people visiting every day, we chose sections that were not easily accessible to casual visitors. The process was the same though. Apply a thick layer of the latex first, then a sheet of gauze, then a few more layers of latex. Each layer was allowed to cure for a few hours. Since it was hot, the initial layers cured very quickly. The last couple of layers I let cure overnight. During this time, I witnessed a few political protests in the streets of Dhaka. The situation actually became tense and the city was put under curfew for a couple of days. I found out that the War Crimes Tribunal of Bangladesh was in the midst of a high-profile trial. The first person convicted was Abul Kalam Azad, tried in absentia as he had fled the country. He was sentenced to death in January 2013 while I was there. The protesters were demanding death sentences for all convicted war criminals. When the latex at the Martyred Intellectuals Monument was curing overnight, we went to the Liberation War Museum to detach the latex casts from their artifacts and help them to put the artifacts back in their cases in the museum. Then we went to the Killing Fields Museum and detached the latex cast from the back wall, the seal of the water tank, and the plaque in the memorial garden. I brought these casts back to the Brito Art Space. Then the next day, we detached all casts from the Martyred Intellectuals Monument and stored them overnight in their local site office. The next day, we transported the casts back to the Brito Art Space. Here, all the casts are laid out on the floor of the Brito Art Space on top of cotton fabric sheets. After letting them air out overnight, I rolled them up and packed them in a suitcase and a tube. And just like that, it was time to fly back to the States. I could hardly believe that I had managed to get casts from 3 different sites in Dhaka. My whirlwind residency at the Brito Art Space had been successful beyond my wildest imagination. I'm so grateful for all the help and support that was provided to me by Brito and Bangladesh for this Dhaka edition of Broken Column. When I got back to Minneapolis, Ben Haywood at the soap factory was similarly overjoyed by my successful trip. I happily got to work preparing all the casts for hanging at the soap factory. These are the casts of the artifacts from the Liberation War Museum installed in a vitrine at the soap factory. This is one of the casts of the Killing Fields Museum installed at the soap factory. This is the cast of the back wall of the Martyred Intellectuals Monument installed in the soap factory. This is the cast of the top of the front wall of the Martyred Intellectuals Monument installed in the Union Art Gallery in UW Milwaukee.